A simple waitress stole the billionaire's heart. Then he proposed in a way no one expected. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The crystal chandeliers of La Maison cast dancing shadows across the marble floors as Skylar James adjusted her pristine white apron. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Upper East Side restaurant, Manhattan's skyline sparkled like a crown of diamonds against the evening sky. She tucked a stray curl back into her neat bun, took a deep breath, and pushed through the kitchen's swinging doors into the dining room. 6 months at New York's most exclusive restaurant had taught her that wealth had a particular scent, a mixture of expensive perfume, aged whiskey, and entitlement. Tonight, that familiar aroma filled the air as she navigated between tables with practiced grace, balancing plates worth more than her monthly rent. Table 7 needs their wine topped off. Monica, another server, whispered as they passed each other. And watch out, Mr. Richardson's here again, 3rd time this week. Skylar nodded, her heart sinking slightly. She knew exactly who Monica meant. The investment banker who seemed to think his American Express black card bought him the right to be insufferable. But she plastered on her professional smile and continued her rounds. Each step was a reminder of why she was here, each tip a brick in the foundation of her dream. The small notebook in her apron pocket held more than just dinner orders. Between the pages was a worn sketch of her future cafe, the Brooklyn Bean. She'd drawn it during countless bus rides home, adding details and refining the vision that kept her going through double shifts and difficult customers. In her mind's eye, she could already see the warm wooden tables, smell the freshly ground coffee, hear the gentle buzz of conversation from satisfied customers. "Excuse me, miss?" A deep voice pulled her from her reverie. She turned to find herself looking into the most startling pair of blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man at table 12 was new. She would have remembered him. He sat alone, his tailored suit and quiet confidence marking him as different from the usual demanding executives. There was something almost painful about his solitude, like a painting hung slightly askew. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to La Maison. May I start you with something from our wine list?" He studied her for a moment longer than necessary, his expression unreadable. "Whatever you recommend." His voice was soft but carried an undercurrent of authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed without question. "The Chateau Margaux 2015 is exceptional," she offered, knowing it was one of their most expensive bottles. "I'll trust your judgment." He didn't even glance at the price. As Skylar moved away to fetch the wine, she felt his eyes following her, not in the way some customers did. This felt different, more like recognition than appraisal. She shook off the sensation. She'd learned early that getting involved with wealthy men was a recipe for disaster. Her ex, Xavier, had taught her that lesson all too well. The night progressed like a well-rehearsed dance. Skylar moved between tables, took orders, delivered plates, and slowly added to her tips. But every time she passed table 12, she felt that same strange pull, like a compass needle drawn to true north. When he finally left, she found a $1,000 tip tucked beneath his wine glass. Her first instinct was to run after him, to return what must have been a mistake. But as she reached the door, she caught a glimpse of him sliding into a sleek black Bentley. The car merged seamlessly into the flow of traffic, disappearing into the night like a ghost. Back inside, Monica whistled at the tip. "Looks like someone made an impression." "It doesn't matter," Skylar said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she folded the bills. "Rich men don't tip like that unless they want something." Maybe he just appreciated good service. Skylar thought of Xavier's generosity at the beginning, how quickly it had turned to control. "There's no such thing as free money, Monica. Everything comes with strings attached. Later that night, as she counted her tips at the empty bar, Skylar pulled out her notebook. The total was good. With the mysterious stranger's tip, she was another significant step closer to her goal. She updated the number in the corner, 47,192s. Still far from what she needed, but progress was progress. She traced her finger over the sketch of the Brooklyn Bean, adding another small detail, a window seat where someone could sit alone, watching the world go by. For a moment, she imagined those striking blue eyes gazing out that window. But she quickly pushed the thought away. She had learned the hard way that fairy tales didn't exist, especially not in New York City. What she didn't know, as she gathered her things and headed for the subway, was that Benjamin Sinclair sat in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, unable to forget the quiet dignity he'd witnessed in a simple waitress. He held a crystal glass of the same wine she'd recommended, but barely tasted it. Instead, he found himself drawing up plans of his own, plans that would soon collide with Skylar's carefully ordered world in ways neither of them could predict. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder that in New York, dreams and nightmares often wore the same face. And sometimes, the most dangerous dreams were the ones that promised to come true. Benjamin Sinclair's corner office on the 85th floor of the Sinclair Tower felt more like a fortress than a workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, but the glass was specially treated to be one way. He could see out, but no one could see in. It was a perfect metaphor for his life. "The Henderson merger documents need your signature," his assistant, Claire, announced from the doorway. She paused, noting the untouched breakfast on his desk. "And you haven't eaten again." Benjamin barely glanced up from his computer screen. "Leave them here. I'll review them before the board meeting. You said that yesterday about the Tokyo contracts." This time he did look up, his expression softening slightly. Claire had been with him for 15 years, long enough to earn the right to occasional insubordination. "I've been distracted by a certain restaurant in the Upper East Side." When he frowned, she added, "Your calendar shows you've had dinner at La Maison 5 times in the past 2 weeks. You never eat out." Benjamin turned to the window, watching a helicopter navigate between skyscrapers. "There's something about her," he said quietly, almost to himself. "She looks at me like I'm nobody. It's refreshing." "Her name is Skylar James," Claire said, placing a slim folder on his desk. 26 years old, graduated top of her class from NYU's business school. She's been working at La Maison for 6 months. Perfect employee record. No criminal history. Excellent credit score despite student loans. And she's saving to open her own cafe. Benjamin's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for a background check." "No, but you were going to." Claire's voice was gentle. "Just be careful, Benjamin. Not everyone is like Alexandra." The name hit him like a physical blow. Alexandra, his mother, who had abandoned him and his father when he was 8, running off with his father's best friend and half the family fortune. The woman who had taught him his first lesson about love. It was always conditional. "I'm not interested in pursuing anything," he said firmly. "I was merely curious." But that night, he found himself back at La Maison, seated at the same table. He watched Skylar move through the restaurant with quiet confidence, handling demanding customers with a grace that seemed almost choreographed. There was something compelling about the way she carried herself, like someone who knew exactly who she was and refused to apologize for it. "Good evening, Mr. Sinclair," she said when she reached his table, and he noticed she'd remembered his name from his credit card. "The usual Chateau Margaux?" "Please." He hesitated, then added, "And perhaps you could recommend an entree?" Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe curiosity. "The duck confit is exceptional. Chef Antoine uses his grandmother's recipe from Provence." "Perfect." He closed the menu, using the moment to study her more closely. She wore no jewelry, except a simple silver chain with a small key pendant. Her uniform was pristine, but he noticed a small notebook peeking out of her apron pocket, its edges worn from frequent handling. "Will anyone be joining you?" she asked, her tone professional, but with an undertone that suggested she already knew the answer. "No, I prefer dining alone." "That's a shame." The words seemed to slip out before she could catch them. A faint blush colored her cheeks. I mean, the dishes here are meant to be shared. Perhaps you could join me." The invitation surprised them both. Skylar's expression closed like a door slamming shut. "I'm working, Mr. Sinclair, and I don't date customers." Her voice carried the weight of experience, of lessons learned the hard way. "I apologize, that was inappropriate." She nodded once and turned away, but not before he caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Not fear, but a weariness that suggested she'd had this conversation before, with men who wouldn't take no for an answer. Benjamin spent the rest of his meal watching her interact with other customers, noticing how she adjusted her approach for each one, warm and chatty, with the elderly couple by the window, efficiently professional with the business group in the corner. She was like a chameleon, but somehow without losing herself in the process. When she brought his check, he left another substantial tip. This time, she didn't try to return it. "Thank you, Mr. Sinclair," she said quietly, "but you should know that generosity won't change my mind." "It's not meant to." He met her gaze steadily. "Good service deserves proper recognition." Something shifted in her expression, not quite trust, but perhaps a crack in her armor. "Have a good evening, Mr. Sinclair." Later that night, as his driver navigated through the city streets, Benjamin found himself thinking about the key pendant she wore. He wondered what it unlocked: a home, a dream, or maybe the walls she'd built around her heart. His phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Don't forget the Henderson documents." But Benjamin was barely listening. Instead, he was formulating a plan. If Skylar wouldn't let him help directly, perhaps there were other ways to make her dreams come true. He pulled up his real estate portfolio on his tablet, scrolling through properties in Brooklyn. "Thomas," he called to his driver, "take me to Williamsburg. There's something I need to see." As they crossed the bridge, Benjamin didn't notice the irony that in trying to prove himself different from other wealthy men, he was about to make exactly the kind of high-handed decision that Skylar would hate most. But then, the walls we build to protect ourselves often become the very things that blind us to our own mistakes. The city lights reflected off the East River, creating patterns that looked like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Skylar was probably counting her tips, adding to her dream dollar by dollar. Benjamin Sinclair, who could buy and sell dreams with a single signature, was about to learn that some things couldn't be purchased at any price. Skylar's boots crunched on broken glass as she stood in front of 247 Bedford Avenue. The "For Lease" sign in the window was weathered, the paint peeling at the corners. But through the grimy storefront, she could see the bones of her dream: high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and enough space for at least 15 tables. "It needs work," the realtor, Mrs. Chen, said diplomatically. "But the location is prime. Williamsburg, 2 blocks from the L train, heavy foot traffic." Skylar ran her hand along the dusty windowsill. "How much?" $4,500 per month, first and last month's deposit required. Plus, you'd need at least $80,000 for renovations to bring it up to code for a food service business. The numbers hit Skylar like physical blows. She'd saved just under $48,000, not even close to what she'd need. And the owner won't consider a lower offer. Mrs. Chen's expression was sympathetic. "The market's hot right now. In fact, there's another interested party. Some investment group looking to develop the whole block." Skylar's throat tightened. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the sketch of the Brooklyn Bean. In her imagination, this space had already been transformed. Warm lighting, the scent of fresh coffee, locals gathered around rustic wooden tables. She'd even picked out the exact shade of deep green for the walls. "I understand," she said quietly, closing the notebook. "Thank you for your time." Outside, the October wind whipped down Bedford Avenue, carrying the scent of approaching rain. Skylar checked her watch. 2 hours until her shift at La Maison. Just enough time to stop by the bank and deposit last night's tips. The lobby of First National was nearly empty when she arrived. As she waited in line, a familiar voice caught her attention. "The terms are non-negotiable, Richard. Either accept the offer or watch your shareholders panic when word gets out." Benjamin Sinclair stood near the entrance, his phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't noticed her yet. Skylar tried to slip behind a potted plant, but it was too late. His eyes met hers, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, then something else she couldn't quite read. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, ending the call mid-protest. "Mr. Sinclair." She nodded politely, hoping he'd move on. Instead, he walked over. "Please call me Benjamin." He glanced at the deposit slip in her hand. "Long night?" "The usual." She shifted uncomfortably, aware of how out of place she looked, in her worn leather jacket and boots, amid the bank's marble opulence. "And how's the cafe fund coming along?" Skylar stiffened. "How did you— I overheard you mentioning it to another server." The lie came smoothly, practiced. "It's an admirable goal." Before she could respond, a bank officer approached them. "Mr. Sinclair, we weren't expecting you until next week's board meeting." "Just dropping off some documents, Patricia." He turned back to Skylar. "Would you join me for coffee? There's an excellent place around the corner." "I can't. My shift starts soon." It wasn't quite true. She had time, but something about his interest made her uneasy. It reminded her too much of Xavier, of how his helpful suggestions had slowly become demands. Another time, perhaps. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card. "If you ever want to discuss your business plan, my door is always open." Skylar took the card reflexively, but her response was firm. "I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to do this on my own." "Everyone needs help sometimes, Skylar." "Not from men who think money can buy anything they want." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Something hardened in Benjamin's eyes. "You think you know me that well?" "I know your type. The world is your shopping list. Everything has a price tag, including people." She thought of Xavier, of how his investment in her dreams had come with invisible strings that had nearly strangled her. "You're wrong." Benjamin's voice was quiet but intense. "Not everything is about money. Says the man who leaves $1,000 tips." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Those tips were appreciation, not manipulation." "Then why offer to help with my business? You barely know me." "Because I—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. "Because talent deserves support." Skylar's next customer in line was called, giving her an excuse to step away. "Goodbye, Mr. Sinclair." She felt his eyes on her back as she approached the teller's window. When she finished her deposit and turned around, he was gone. His business card, however, burned in her pocket like a hot coal. That evening at La Maison, table 12 remained conspicuously empty. Skylar told herself she was relieved, but something nagged at her. The way he'd looked at her in the bank, not with pity or condescension, but with something that looked almost like recognition. After her shift, she pulled out his card. "Benjamin Sinclair, CEO, Sinclair Enterprises." The paper was thick, expensive, On impulse, she Googled him. Her heart nearly stopped. Benjamin Sinclair wasn't just rich, he was a billionaire. His company owned half the real estate in Manhattan, and according to the latest business news, they were expanding into Brooklyn, specifically into Williamsburg. With trembling fingers, she pulled up the property listing for 247 Bedford Avenue. The for lease sign was gone, replaced by a new one, under contract. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. His convenient appearance at the bank, his interest in her cafe, the investment group Mrs. Chen had mentioned. Schuyler crumpled his business card and threw it in the trash. She'd been right. Men like Benjamin Sinclair didn't help. They took over. Her dream would remain her own, even if it took years longer to achieve. What she didn't know was that across town, Benjamin sat in his darkened office, staring at a newly signed contract. He'd bought the entire block, planning to lease her the space at a fraction of market rate through a shell company. In his mind, it was the perfect solution. She'd get her cafe, never knowing he was involved. But as he looked out at the city, lights, his mother's words echoed in his memory. Love can't be bought, darling, but everything else can. He'd spent his life proving her right. Now, for the first time, he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. "What do you mean, the lease is denied?" Schuyler stared at Mrs. Chen across the realtor's cluttered desk. Outside, rain drummed against the windows, matching her darkening mood. "The new owners have different plans for the space." Mrs. Chen shuffled uncomfortably through her papers. "They're offering you a different location, though, a prime spot, just 3 blocks away. The rent would be significantly lower, and they're offering to cover renovation costs." Schuyler's fingers found her key pendant, clutching it like a lifeline. "That's impossible. No landlord in Williamsburg would offer below-market rent. It's a community development initiative." Mrs. Chen wouldn't meet her eyes. "The paperwork comes through Bedford Holdings, LLC." The name meant nothing to Schuyler, but something felt off. She'd spent enough time around wealthy people to recognize when things were too good to be true. "May I see the offer?" Mrs. Chen handed over a thick envelope. The paper was expensive, the kind used in high-end legal offices. Schuyler's hands trembled slightly as she read through the terms. Rent at a third of market rate, $100,000 in renovation allowance, flexible payment terms. Her heart stopped when she reached the signature line. The letterhead might say Bedford Holdings LLC, but the document was printed on Sinclair Enterprises watermarked paper. "Son of a bitch," she whispered. Without another word, she grabbed her bag and stormed out into the rain. The storm had cleared the streets, but Schuyler barely noticed the water soaking through her clothes as she marched toward the subway station. Her mind raced with memories of Xavier, of how his help had started just like this, seemingly generous offers that became chains, binding her to his control. 40 minutes later, she stood in the gleaming lobby of Sinclair Tower, water dripping onto the marble floor. "I'm sorry, miss, but Mr. Sinclair is in a meeting," the security guard said, eyeing her wet clothes with suspicion. "Then he can spare 5 minutes." She pulled out her La Maison name tag. "Tell him Schuyler James is here. He'll see me." The guard made the call. A moment later, Claire appeared, her expression carefully neutral. "This way, Miss James." The elevator ride to the 85th floor was silent. Claire led her through a maze of glass-walled offices to a large conference room where Benjamin sat at the head of a table full of executives. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Excuse me, gentlemen. We'll reconvene in an hour." The men filed out, several casting curious glances at Schuyler's disheveled appearance. "How dare you?" she said the moment the door closed. "I assume you've seen the lease offer." His voice was calm, controlled. "Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? That I'm too stupid to recognize your letterhead? Schuyler, no." She slapped the wet envelope onto his polished table. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to justify this. What gave you the right to interfere in my life? I was trying to help. He stood, his height making the room feel suddenly smaller. You need that space, and I can provide it. I need to do this on my own, my dream, my way. And pride is more important than practicality? There was an edge to his voice now. You're turning down an excellent business opportunity because you're afraid of appearing weak. I'm turning it down because I've seen what happens when men like you help women like me. The words felt like glass in her throat. First, it's a generous lease. Then it's suggestions about the menu, the decor, the staff. Before you know it, you're not running your own business. You're managing someone else's investment. Benjamin's expression darkened. I'm not Xavier. The name hit her like a physical blow. How do you... I know about the cafe he promised, to help you open, about how he used that promise to control you, to isolate you from your family. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. I'm trying to be different, or by investigating my past, by manipulating situations behind my back. Skylar laughed bitterly. You're right. You're not Xavier. You're worse. You actually believe your interference is justified. Because I see your potential. His controlled facade cracked. You have the skills, the vision, the drive. All you need is what? A rich man to save me. She pulled the key pendant from her neck, the chain breaking with a soft snap. You see this? It's from the first cafe I ever worked at. The owner, a woman named Rose, gave it to me when she retired. She built that place from nothing on her own terms. That's what I want. And if you fail, then I fail on my own terms too. They stood in silence, the rain drumming against the windows. Benjamin moved closer, close enough that Skylar could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides. I've spent my life believing everything has a price, he said quietly. That enough money can solve any problem, fulfill any need. But you? He gestured helplessly. You make me question everything I thought I knew. For a moment, Skylar saw past his walls, saw the lonely boy abandoned by his mother, the man who'd built an empire to prove his worth. It would be so easy to soften, to accept his help, to let herself believe he was different. Instead, she placed the broken key pendant on his desk. Cancel the lease offer, Mr. Sinclair, and don't come to La Maison again. Please. She turned and walked out, leaving wet footprints on his expensive carpet. In the elevator, her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized, wild-eyed, drenched, but standing tall. Benjamin watched her go, the small key pendant glinting on his desk like an accusation. For the first time in his adult life, all his money and power felt worthless. He picked up the pendant, its weight insignificant in his hand, but heavy with meaning. Claire appeared in the doorway. The board is waiting to reconvene. Cancel everything, he said, still staring at the key. I need to think. As the storm raged outside his windows, Benjamin Sinclair began to realize that some locks couldn't be opened with any key in his considerable collection, and some hearts, once locked against hope, required more than money to trust again. The morning rush at La Maison felt different without the weight of the key pendant against Skylar's chest. She moved through her tasks mechanically, barely noticing the chaos of the breakfast service around her. "Order up for table 9!" Chef Antoine's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Skylar! The plates are getting cold!" "Sorry, Chef," she hurried, to collect the dishes, nearly colliding with Monica. "Hey, you okay?" Monica steadied her with a gentle hand. "You've been off all week." "I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter. Just tired. But it wasn't fatigue that had her checking every new customer, half hoping, half dreading to see a familiar pair of blue eyes. Table 12 had remained empty for 5 days, exactly as she'd asked. So why did its emptiness feel like an accusation? Girl, you need to talk to someone." Monica pulled her into the service alcove. "You're making mistakes, forgetting orders. This isn't you." Skylar leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "I found the perfect location for my cafe." "That's great." It was, until I discovered Benjamin Sinclair bought the entire block just to offer me a subsidized lease. Monica's eyes widened. "Wait, Benjamin Sinclair, the billionaire who's been leaving you those tips?" "The same." Skylar straightened her apron, needing something to do with her hands. "He had me investigated, Monica. He knew about Xavier, about everything. Maybe he was just trying to help. That's what Xavier said at first, too." Skylar's voice cracked slightly. "He wanted to help by investing in my dream. Then he used that investment to control every aspect of my life. What I wore, who I saw, how I spoke. By the end, I didn't recognize myself anymore." Monica was quiet for a moment. "Benjamin Sinclair isn't Xavier." "No, he's more dangerous." Skylar pushed away from the wall, "because part of me wants to believe he's different." Across town, Benjamin sat in his office, turning Skylar's broken key pendant over in his hands. He'd had it repaired, the delicate silver chain replaced with a stronger one, but he couldn't bring himself to return it. "The Bedford Avenue contracts are ready to be voided," Claire said from the doorway. "Are you sure about this?" Benjamin placed the pendant in his desk drawer. "Cancel everything, sell the properties back to the original owners. May I speak freely? When has that ever stopped you?" Claire closed the door and sat down. "I've worked for you for 15 years. I've seen you close billion-dollar deals without blinking, but I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Unsure." She leaned forward. "You're dismantling a perfectly sound business investment because a waitress hurt your feelings." "This isn't about feelings." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. She was right, Claire. "I tried to control her life, just like your mother controlled your father." Claire's voice softened. "Benjamin, helping someone doesn't always mean you're trying to control them." "Doesn't it?" He stood, moving to the window. "Every decision I've made since I was 18 has been about control. Building this company, acquiring properties, managing people's lives through their mortgages and leases. I told myself I was different from my mother, but I'm just like her, trying to buy love and loyalty." "The difference is your intention." Claire stood, joining him at the window. "Your mother used money to hurt people. You're trying, albeit clumsily, to help someone achieve their dream." Benjamin thought of Skylar's face in the rain, fierce and wounded all at once. "I've lost her trust." "Then earn it back. Not with money or power, but with understanding." That evening, Skylar found herself standing outside 247 Bedford Avenue again. The windows were dark, the space still empty. She pressed her hand against the glass, remembering how close her dream had felt. "It's still available, you know." She spun around to find Benjamin standing a few feet away. He looked different in jeans and a sweater, more human somehow. "I told you to stay away from me." "You told me to stay away from La Maison." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "This isn't La Maison. What do you want?" "To apologize." He pulled something from his pocket, her key pendant, the chain repaired. "And to return this. It doesn't belong with me." Skylar stared at the pendant, her throat tight. "Why did you do it? Really?" "Because when I look at you, I see someone who reminds me of who I wanted to be before money became my answer to everything." He held out the pendant. "Someone who knows that true worth isn't measured in dollars." "And the lease offer?" "Cancelled. The building's back on the open market." He smiled sadly. "Your dream deserves to be achieved your way." Skylar took the pendant, the familiar weight comforting in her palm. "Thank you. I have something else for you." He pulled an envelope from his back pocket. "Not money," he added quickly. "Information. The names of small business organizations that offer legitimate microloans. Resources I wish I'd known about when I was starting out. Take them or don't. It's your choice." He placed the envelope on the windowsill and stepped back. "Goodbye, Skylar." She watched him walk away, the envelope untouched. The street was quiet, except for distant traffic and the hollow echo of his footsteps. Her fingers traced the repaired chain of her pendant, feeling the strength of the new links. Later that night, after her shift, she returned to Bedford Avenue. The envelope was still there, slightly damp from evening mist. She opened it, expecting to find some hidden agenda, some trace of manipulation. Instead, she found exactly what he'd promised: resources, contacts, opportunities she'd never known existed. And on the last page, written in his precise handwriting, "Some locks need more than one key to open. Your dream is worth every attempt." Skylar clutched her pendant, its weight familiar against her palm. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a difference between accepting help and surrendering control. The thought terrified her, but it also felt like the first crack in a wall she'd built so high she'd forgotten what was on the other side. November in New York brought early darkness and bitter winds. The streets of Brooklyn were quieter now, tourists replaced by hurrying locals bundled against the cold. Inside a small office at the Women's Business Center, Skylar sat across from Diana Rodriguez, a lone counselor whose gray hair and warm smile reminded her of her grandmother. "Your business plan is solid," Diana said, flipping through the worn notebook. "But we need to talk about your financial projections." Skylar shifted in her chair. A month ago, she would have shut down at any suggestion of help. But Benjamin's envelope had led her here, and something about Diana's straightforward manner put her at ease. "What's wrong with them?" "They're too conservative." Diana tapped the page. "You're planning for worst-case scenarios in every category. It's prudent, but it's also holding you back." "Better safe than sorry. Better brave than broken." Diana closed the notebook. "Someone hurt you badly, didn't they? Made you afraid to take risks." Skylar touched her key pendant, a gesture that had become habit again. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there." Diana pulled out a fresh spreadsheet. "Let's work on these numbers together, not to change your dream, but to give it room to grow." 2 hours later, Skylar emerged into the early evening with a stack of revised projections and a head full of new possibilities. The microloans Diana had suggested, combined with her savings, might actually be enough, not for the Bedford Avenue location, but perhaps for something similar. Lost in thought, she almost missed the familiar figure standing by the building's entrance. "Monica said you had an appointment here," Benjamin said quietly. He looked different in the fading light, less the untouchable billionaire, more the uncertain man she'd glimpsed beneath his armor. "Are you having me followed again?" "No." He smiled slightly. "But your friend thinks we're both idiots." "Despite herself," Skylar laughed. "She's probably right. Would you like to get coffee? Just coffee," he added quickly. "No business proposals, no grand gestures, just two people who could use a warm drink on a cold day." She should say no, every carefully constructed wall demanded she say no. But Diana's words echoed in her mind, "Better brave than broken." "One condition," she said, "not some fancy cafe. I know a place in Brooklyn." 20 minutes later, they sat in Rose's Corner Cafe, a small establishment that had seen better days. The vinyl booths were cracked, the linoleum floor worn, but the coffee was excellent and the space hummed with local energy. "This is where it all started," Skylar said, watching Benjamin take in the modest surroundings. "My first job at 16, Rose gave me that key when she retired." "What happened to the cafe?" "Her son runs it now. She hesitated. He's struggling. Rose had a way with people that he never learned. Benjamin sipped his coffee. Black, no sugar. His surprise at its quality showed on his face. It's good. Rose taught me that great coffee isn't about expensive beans or fancy machines. It's about attention to detail and respect for the process. She traced the rim of her cup. That's what I want for the Brooklyn Bean. Not just a cafe, but a place that feels like home. Tell me more. So she did. For the first time, she shared her complete vision. The community board where local artists could advertise, the open mic nights for aspiring musicians, the corner dedicated to children's books. Benjamin listened without interrupting, his eyes intent on her face. The finances are still tight, she admitted finally. Even with the microloans Diana suggested. May I see your projections? Not to interfere, he added, seeing her hesitation. Just to understand. Slowly, she pulled out her notebook. Benjamin studied the numbers carefully, his expression thoughtful. Your coffee supplier estimates are high. Those are standard wholesale prices. Not necessarily. He pulled out his phone, showing her a different supplier's website. This company works specifically with independent cafes. Their prices are better and they're minority-owned. Schuyler stared at the numbers. How do you know about them? I've been researching the industry. At her surprised look, he shrugged. I wanted to understand your world better. Why? Because you made me realize I've been looking at business all wrong. It's not just about profits and market share. It's about community, about creating spaces that matter. A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting warm pools of light on the sidewalk. The cafe had begun to empty, the dinner rush fading. I have a proposition, Benjamin said finally. Not financial, he added quickly. Knowledge, you understand. Coffee and community. I understand business logistics and supplier networks. What if we helped each other learn? Schuyler tensed. I know what you don't want. His voice was gentle. I'm not offering to invest or interfere. I'm offering to exchange knowledge as equals. You teach me about creating spaces. That matter. I teach you about negotiating with suppliers. No strings, no obligations. And if I say no, then we finish our coffee, and I wish you well. He met her gaze steadily. Your choice. Always your choice. Schuyler looked around the cafe, remembering Rose's first lessons about coffee and community. The old woman had always said that the bravest thing wasn't standing alone. It was learning to trust again after being hurt. 1 hour a week, she said finally, in public places, and the moment you try to take over, I won't. He smiled, and for the first time, she saw no trace of the powerful CEO, just a man trying to learn a new way of seeing the world. Thank you. As they left the cafe, the winter wind had softened to a gentle breeze. Schuyler's key pendant caught the streetlight, casting tiny reflections on the sidewalk. She thought about locks and keys, about walls and bridges, about the difference between being helped and being saved. Same time next week? Benjamin asked. Yes. The word felt like stepping off a cliff and finding, surprisingly, that she knew how to fly. But next time, I'm teaching you how to make a proper espresso. He laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and warm. I look forward to it. They parted ways at the subway station, each heading back to their different worlds. But something had shifted, like the first thaw after a long winter. Sometimes, Schuyler realized, the bravest thing you can do is give someone else the chance to prove you wrong about them. You're holding the porter-filter wrong. Schuyler adjusted Benjamin's grip on the espresso machine's handle. It's not a business contract. You don't need to strangle it. They stood in La Maison's kitchen after closing, the restaurant quiet, except for the gentle hum of cleaning crews. Chef Antoine had given them permission to use the professional equipment for their lessons, though his raised eyebrow suggested he found the situation amusing. Like this? Benjamin loosened his grip slightly. Better. Now tap it gently to settle the grounds. She watched him execute the movement with the same intensity he probably brought to board meetings. You're still thinking too hard. I always think too hard. But there was a smile in his voice. It's how I built my empire. And how's that working out for your coffee? As if in answer, the espresso streamed out too quickly, thin and pale. Benjamin frowned at the liquid. What went wrong? You didn't tamp the grounds firmly enough. Good espresso is about balance. Too much pressure and you choke the machine. Too little and you get... She gestured at his watery creation. This. A metaphor for life? His blue eyes met hers, unexpectedly thoughtful. Maybe. Skylar began cleaning the portafilter. Speaking of balance, I visited that supplier you recommended. Their prices are good, but the minimum order quantities are too high for a small cafe. Have you considered partnering with other independent shops? Collective buying power could help negotiate better terms. She paused. A month ago, such a suggestion would have felt like interference. Now it felt like collaboration. How would that work? For the next hour, they talked business over failed espresso attempts. Benjamin explained supply chain logistics while Skylar taught him about coffee varieties and roasting profiles. It had become their weekly dance, this careful exchange of knowledge, each teaching the other about their world. Your turn, Benjamin said finally. Tell me about creating community, spaces. What made Rose's Cafe special? Skylar leaned against the counter, thinking. It wasn't just a business to her. She knew everyone's names, their usual orders, their stories. There was this old man, Mr. Peterson, who came in every morning after his wife died. Rose would sit with him during her breaks, just listening. When he passed away, half the neighborhood came to his funeral. That's what's missing from my buildings, Benjamin said quietly. We focus on luxury amenities, premium services, but we've forgotten about human connection. Is that why you've been visiting your properties more often? He looked surprised. How did you know? Claire told Monica, who told me. Apparently you've been talking to tenants asking about their experiences. I'm learning. He started cleaning up their coffee-making attempts. Actually, I have something to show you, not a business proposition, he added quickly. Just something I'm trying. Curiosity won over caution. Show me. An hour later, they stood in the lobby of one of his residential buildings in Chelsea. The space had been recently renovated, but not in the cold luxury style Skylar expected. Instead, comfortable seating areas invited conversation, and a small coffee bar staffed by a cheerful barista served residents. The idea came from our talks about roses, Benjamin explained. We converted the unused lobby space into a community area. Residents can gather here, work, talk. The coffee's free. Skylar watched a young mother settle into a cozy chair while her toddler played with toys provided in a corner nook. This is different. Good different? Very good. She turned to him, seeing the uncertainty beneath his confident exterior. You're creating a home, not just an address. His smile was surprisingly boyish. I have you to thank for that perspective. They ended up at the coffee bar, where the barista, Linda, made them both lattes. Benjamin grimaced at his first sip. Too hot? Too sweet. He studied the drink. I'm starting to appreciate why you're so passionate about proper coffee. Speaking of which, Skylar pulled out her notebook, showing him her revised business plan. I found a possible location. It's smaller than Bedford Avenue, needs more work, but it's yours, he finished, on your terms. Exactly. She hesitated. Would you look at the numbers, just as a second opinion? The request hung between them, delicate as spun sugar. Benjamin took the notebook carefully, as if handling something precious. I'd be honored. They spent the next hour going over her projections. Benjamin pointed out potential issues and opportunities, but never once tried to offer solutions unless she asked. It was a careful dance they'd developed, sharing knowledge without overstepping, offering perspective without pushing. As they wrapped up, a thought struck Schuyler. Why did you really start coming to La Maison that first night? Benjamin was quiet for a moment. I had just finished a merger deal. Ruthless negotiation, hostile takeover, perfect business victory. I should have been celebrating, but instead I felt empty. I walked into La Maison because it was close, but I kept coming back because of how you treated people. You saw them, really saw them, not just their wealth or status. And now? Now I'm learning that true success isn't measured in acquisitions. He smiled ruefully. Though I still can't make a decent espresso. You'll get there. Schuyler gathered her things, suddenly aware of how comfortable she'd become in his presence. Same time next week? Actually, he hesitated. There's a small business seminar at the Women's Center this weekend. Diana mentioned you're attending. Would you mind if I came? Not to participate, he added quickly. Just to listen and learn. A month ago, such a request would have sent her running. Now she found herself nodding. Just remember, no power suits. You'll scare everyone. His laugh echoed in the lobby as they parted ways. Outside, the December air was crisp with the promise of snow. Schuyler touched her key pendant, thinking about locks and changes and the subtle art of learning to trust. In her bag, her notebook held more than just business plans now. It held the story of two people learning to see the world through each other's eyes. One coffee lesson, one spreadsheet, one careful step at a time. What neither of them realized was that their weekly dance was becoming something more, a rhythm that would soon test the boundaries they'd so carefully drawn, forcing them to decide if some risks were worth taking after all. The news hit like a thunderbolt during their weekly coffee lesson. Rose's is closing. Benjamin watched Schuyler's hands tremble as she tried to tamp the espresso grounds. When? End of the month. The portafilter clattered against the counter. Rose's son took out loans he couldn't repay. The bank's foreclosing. I'm sorry. He reached for her hand, then stopped himself. Their careful dance had rules, boundaries. Is there anything? Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't offer to buy it or save it or fix it. Please. Benjamin withdrew, respecting her words, even as something in his chest ached at her pain. Tell me about it. Not as a business opportunity. Just tell me what it means to you. Schuyler sank onto a nearby stool, her normally perfect posture crumbling. It's not just a cafe, it's where everything started. Rose taught me that running a business isn't just about profits. It's about creating a space where people feel seen, heard, valued. Through the kitchen windows, snow was beginning to fall early for December. The white flakes made La Maison's normally bustling street seem hushed, intimate. The worst part, Schuyler continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I have enough. For a down payment now, the microloans are approved. I found a perfect space in Greenpoint. Everything was falling into place, and now I can't celebrate. Not when Rose's legacy is being erased. She pulled out her notebook, the pages dog-eared from constant use. I keep thinking about Mr. Peterson, about all the regulars who made that place their second home. Where will they go? Benjamin fought every instinct that screamed at him to solve this, to throw money at the problem until it went away. Instead, he asked, what would Rose do? Schuyler paused, something shifting in her expression. She'd find a way to preserve the community even if she couldn't save the building. Before Benjamin could respond, his phone buzzed. The message made his blood run cold. Sinclair Tower lobby now. Channel 7 news crew. Xavier Chen giving interview about predatory business practices. I have to go. He stood abruptly. Emergency at the office. Skylar's eyes narrowed at his sudden change. Benjamin, what's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. But his voice was tight, controlled in a way she hadn't heard since their early encounters. She grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. Don't do that. Don't shut me out. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the careful walls they'd built between them wavered. Benjamin saw genuine concern in her face, not for his business empire, but for him. Xavier Chen is at my building, he said finally, giving an interview about my company's supposed predatory practices. Skylar's grip on his arm tightened. Xavier? My Xavier? Yes, he's been trying to force a hostile takeover of several of my smaller holdings. I didn't tell you because you thought I'd run. The hurt in her voice was palpable. Because I didn't want him anywhere near your life again. They stood in charged silence, snow falling steadily outside. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a rare occurrence during a snowstorm, making the moment feel almost surreal. I'm coming with you, Skylar said suddenly. Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that. Her voice was firm. You've been learning to see business my way. Now let me help you handle this my way. Skylar, I know Xavier. I know how he thinks, how he manipulates situations. She was already untying her apron. And I'm tired of letting him make me feel powerless. Benjamin looked at her, really looked at her. Gone was the cautious woman who flinched at offers of help. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that accepting help didn't mean surrendering power. Okay, he said softly, but promise me something. What? If it gets too intense, you'll leave. No matter what's happening, your well-being comes first. Something flickered in Skylar's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at his prioritizing her safety over his company's reputation. Deal. The ride to Sinclair Tower was tense. Through the car's tinted windows, they watched the snow transform Manhattan into something almost magical. But there was nothing magical about the scene that awaited them. Xavier Chen stood in the lobby, surrounded by news cameras. He was exactly as Skylar remembered, handsome, polished, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The sight of him made her stomach churn, but she forced herself to stand tall. Benjamin Sinclair claims to be a pillar of the business community, Xavier was saying, but his recent activities in Brooklyn tell a different story. Small businesses forced out, community spaces demolished. That's interesting coming from you. Skylar's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. Xavier turned, his practiced smile faltering. Skylar. She stepped forward, Benjamin a steady presence at her side. Tell them, Xavier. Tell them about how you really treat small businesses, about how you help people achieve their dreams, as long as they surrender complete control to you. The cameras swung toward her. Xavier's smile turned cold. This is a private business. No, this is about truth. Skylar's voice was clear, strong. Benjamin Sinclair has spent the last 2 months learning about community impact, about creating spaces that matter. While you've been plotting takeovers, he's been serving coffee with baristas, talking to residents, understanding what people really need. And I suppose he's helping you too? Xavier's insinuation was clear. Some things never change, do they, Skylar? Before Benjamin could react, Skylar pulled out her notebook. Actually, yes, he's helping me by learning from me. Every suggestion, every piece of advice, it's all documented right here. Along with my completely independent business plan, approved loans, and lease negotiations. She turned to the cameras. Want a real story? Look into Xavier Chen's pattern of investing in women-owned businesses, then systematically taking control through predatory loan terms. I'm sure his other victims would love to talk. The reporter's interest visibly shifted. Xavier's cool facade cracked. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but the cameras caught his expression. "No," Skylar said quietly. "I'm done regretting anything about you." As the reporters swarmed Xavier with new questions, Benjamin touched Skylar's elbow gently. "Let's get out of here." They escaped to his private elevator, the doors closing on the chaos below. As they rose above the city, Skylar finally allowed herself to shake. "Hey!" Benjamin's voice was soft. "You were incredible down there." "I was terrified." She leaned against the elevator wall. "But I couldn't let him hurt anyone else. Not you, not other businesses, not Rose's legacy." Benjamin looked at her thoughtfully. "What you said about Rose preserving the community, don't." But her protest was weaker now. "We talked about this. Not as a savior or a solution," he said carefully, "but maybe as a partner, equal stakes, equal say. Your expertise, your vision, just with someone who believes in it, standing beside you." The elevator stopped at his office floor. Through the windows, the snow was falling harder, turning the city into a snow globe of infinite possibilities. Skylar touched her key pendant, thinking about locks and changes and the way some doors only open when you're ready to walk through them. "I'll think about it," she said finally. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And sometimes, in the space between certainties, the most important changes begin. The last day at Rose's Corner Cafe felt like a funeral. Regulars filled every booth, sharing memories over final cups of coffee. Mr. Peterson's old corner seat had been decorated with flowers, a small tribute to the community that was about to dissolve. Skylar stood behind the counter where she'd first learned to make coffee 12 years ago. Rose's son had asked her to help close up one last time, though the defeat in his eyes made it clear he didn't want to be there. "Remember when Rose taught me to steam milk?" Monica had come to help, her eyes misty. "I sprayed it everywhere and she just laughed. She never got angry." Skylar ran her hand along the ancient espresso machine. "She said mistakes mean you're learning." The bell above. The door chimed. Benjamin stood in the entrance, snow dusting his casual sweater. No power suit today. He was learning. Their eyes met across the cafe, and something unspoken passed between them. It had been 3 days since his offer of partnership, 3 days of sleepless nights and endless internal debates. Every time she'd nearly convinced herself to say no, she'd remember how he'd stood beside her against Xavier, not to protect her, but to support her standing up for herself. "I'll handle this," Monica whispered, nudging her toward the door. Outside, the snow was falling again, turning Brooklyn into a wonderland of white frosted fire escapes and glowing windows. They walked in silence, their footprints marking a path through the fresh snow. "I didn't expect you here," Skylar finally said. "I needed to see it, to understand." Benjamin brushed snow from his hair. "This place, it's more than just a business. Model to study, isn't it? It's where I learned who I could be." They stopped at a small park, the swings creaking gently in the winter wind. Rose used to say that a great cafe is like a heartbeat in the neighborhood. Steady, reliable, giving life to everything around it. Benjamin watched a group of children having a snowball fight nearby. "That's what you did for me, you know." "What do you mean?" "You made me see the heartbeat in everything." He turned to face her. "I used to measure success in acquisitions and profit margins. Now I walk into my buildings and see communities, lives, stories." "Benjamin, let me finish, please." His voice was soft but urgent. "I'm not offering partnership because I want to control your dream or because I think you need saving. I'm offering because you've shown me a better way to succeed, and I want to be part of building something that matters." Skylar sat on one of the swings, the cold chain grounding her. "I've been thinking about your offer, a lot." Benjamin took the swing next to her, looking almost boyish in the falling snow. "And?" "I'm scared. The admission felt like letting go of a breath she'd been holding forever. Not of you, exactly, but of what happens when personal feelings mix with business. You think I have personal feelings for you? Don't you? Their eyes met, and for the first time, they both stopped pretending. The weekly coffee lessons, the long conversations, the way they'd learned to read each other's silences, it had never really been just about business. Yes, Benjamin said simply, but that's not why I want to be your partner. Then why? Because you're brilliant. Because your vision for community spaces is exactly what this city needs. Because, he smiled slightly, because you taught me that real power isn't in controlling things, but in helping them grow. Skylar kicked at the snow beneath her swing. I've been working on a new business plan, not just for one cafe, but for a network of community spaces. Places like Rose's, but with modern touches, where people can gather, work, connect. Tell me more. Each location would have its own character, reflecting its neighborhood. Local artists work on the walls, open mic nights, community boards, but also good coffee, comfortable workspaces, reliable Wi-Fi. She pulled out her notebook. I've been calculating startup costs, thinking about scalability while maintaining that personal touch Rose always had. Benjamin listened intently, not interrupting. When she finished, he asked, "What's holding you back?" Besides the obvious financial challenges. Skylar stood, pacing in the snow. I'm afraid of losing myself in someone else's vision again. With Xavier, it started just like this. Excitement, shared dreams, promises of equality. What can I do to prove I'm different? The question hung in the snowy air between them. Skylar touched her key pendant, thinking about all the lessons it represented. About Rose's wisdom, about learning to trust, about the difference between being controlled and being supported. Come with me, she said suddenly. They walked back to Rose's, where the last customers were finally leaving. Monica gave Skylar a knowing look as they entered, handing over the spare key without a word. In the quiet cafe, Skylar led Benjamin behind the counter. Make me a cappuccino. What? Show me what you've learned. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He stepped up to the espresso machine, moving through the steps she'd taught him. His movements were careful but confident, grinding the beans, tamping the grounds with just the right pressure, steaming the milk to a silky texture. The cappuccino he placed before her wasn't perfect. The foam was slightly uneven, the temperature a touch too hot. But he'd remembered every step, respected every part of the process. I'm still learning, he said quietly. I'll always be learning. From you. Skylar took a sip, then pulled out her notebook. On a fresh page, she wrote, Partnership Agreement. 1. Equal stakes, equal say in all decisions. 2. Community impact prioritized alongside profit. 3. Each location maintains individual character. 4. Local hiring and fair wages non-negotiable. 5. Expansion only when quality and mission can be maintained. She slid the notebook to him. These are my terms, non-negotiable. Benjamin read them carefully, then pulled out a pen and added, 6. Skylar James maintains full creative control over cafe concepts and community programs. 7. Partnership decisions require mutual agreement. 8. Regular community feedback integrated into growth plans. He passed it back. My additions, what do you think? Skylar read them, something warm unfurling in her chest. This wasn't Xavier's false equality or Benjamin's earlier attempts at control. This was collaboration, partnership, trust. One more condition, she said softly. Name it. If we do this, the business partnership, we need to figure out us, whatever this is between us. Because I can't pretend anymore that it's just about coffee lessons and business plans. Benjamin stood, moving close enough that she could see the snowflakes melting on his sweater. "I think that's the best condition yet." Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping Brooklyn in a blanket of white. Inside Rose's Corner Cafe, where Skylar's journey had begun so many years ago, something new was taking root. Not an ending, but a transformation. Not a surrender, but a joining of forces. "Partners." Benjamin held out his hand. Skylar looked at his offered hand, then up at his face. In his eyes, she saw not the powerful CEO or the lonely billionaire, but simply the man who had learned to make coffee just to understand her world better. "Partners," she agreed, taking his hand. And in that moment, with the ghost of Rose's wisdom surrounding them and the promise of something new ahead, both of them understood that sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on to your walls. It's letting someone help you build something better in their place. 6 months later, spring sunshine streamed through the windows of the Brooklyn Beans flagship location. The space at 247 Bedford Avenue, yes, that Bedford Avenue, had been transformed, but not in the way anyone had expected. Exposed brick, walls displayed local artists' work, while comfortable seating areas invited conversation and connection. The coffee bar, crafted from reclaimed wood, gleamed under pendant lights, but the heart of the space was the corner that had been dedicated to Rose's memory. There, an antique espresso machine, the very one from Rose's Corner Cafe, stood proudly on display. Beside it, a wall of photos told the story of a community's evolution. Rose teaching a teenage Skylar to steam milk, regular customers sharing laughs, and new memories being made in this fresh space. "Your macchiato, Mr. Peterson." "Junior." Skylar placed the cup in front of a young man who looked remarkably like his late father. "Your dad would have loved seeing you become a regular here. He would have loved this place." Peterson smiled, glancing around. "It feels like Rose's, but renewed, like something old and something new came together perfectly." "That's the idea." Benjamin's voice came from behind her. He'd abandoned his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up as he helped behind the counter during the morning rush. The sight still made Skylar's heart skip. This powerful CEO, who now spent at least one shift a week making coffee alongside their staff. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of change. After their agreement that snowy night in Rose's, they'd moved forward with careful intention. The partnership agreement, framed on Skylar's office wall, had become their blueprint for combining vision with practicality. When 247 Bedford Avenue came back on the market, they'd purchased it together. Not through Sinclair Enterprises, but through their new joint venture, Community Grounds LLC. The name had been Benjamin's suggestion, representing their shared commitment to building something meaningful from the ground up. "You're getting better at the latte art," Skylar observed, watching him carefully pour a heart pattern. "I had a good teacher." His eyes met hers, full of warmth and something deeper. Their personal relationship had evolved as carefully as their professional one. Date nights separate from business meetings, learning to balance partnership with romance. The morning rush began to slow, and their staff, all local hires, many trained by Skylar herself, had things well in hand. Benjamin touched her elbow gently. "Ready?" She nodded, following him to their shared office. Unlike the corporate minimalism of Sinclair Tower, this space reflected their merged aesthetics, her vintage coffee prints alongside his organized spreadsheets, her worn notebook next to his tablet. "The numbers from the first quarter are in," he said, pulling up the reports. "We're exceeding projections, and the community impact metrics." He smiled at her insistence on measuring success beyond profit. "Even better, engagement is high. Local artists have sold 16 pieces through our gallery wall, and the morning workspace program is at capacity." What about the Roses initiative? Well, this was their pride and joy, a program that provided mentorship and microloans to aspiring cafe owners, particularly women and minorities. It had been Benjamin's idea, inspired by Skylar's story, but she had shaped it into something truly meaningful. 3 new applications this week. The committee is reviewing them now. Skylar sat on the edge of his desk, picking up a framed photo. It showed them on opening day, her laughing as he tried to operate the espresso machine, both of them covered in coffee grounds. The photographer had captured the moment perfectly. 2 people who had found something rare in each other, true partnership. "I have something for you," Benjamin said softly. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small box. Skylar's heart stuttered. "Benjamin, it's not what you think. Open it." Inside was a key, old, ornate, similar to the one she wore around her neck. "Rose's son found it in the old cafe during cleanup," Benjamin explained. "It's the original key to the front door from when Rose first opened in 1985. Tears pricked at Skylar's eyes. "How did you—" "I've been in touch with him. He's doing better now, working with our mentorship program. He said Rose would have wanted you to have this." Skylar held the key carefully, feeling its weight, not just metal, but legacy. "We should display it with the espresso machine." "Actually," Benjamin touched her pendant, "I thought it might look good next to this one. A reminder that some dreams don't end. They just transform into something new." She looked at him, really looked at him. Gone was the controlled CEO who had first walked into La Maison. In his place was a man who had learned that true power lay in lifting others up, in building bridges instead of walls. "I love you," she said simply. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, but it felt significant here, in this space they'd built together. "I love you too." He lifted her hand, kissing her palm. "But you still haven't answered my other question." "What other question?" Benjamin's eyes twinkled. "The one about adding a small wedding venue to our next location." "Benjamin Sinclair!" But she was laughing. "Are you trying to propose through a business expansion plan? Is it working?" She pulled him close, breathing in the scent of coffee and possibility. "Ask me properly and find out." The morning sun painted patterns on the floor, and through the open office door they could hear the comfortable buzz of their cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the sound of community being built one cup at a time. Benjamin pulled back slightly, his expression serious. "Skylar James, you've taught me that true success isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch. You've shown me that real strength lies in partnership, not control. Would you do me the honor of continuing that lesson for the rest of our lives?" Skylar touched both keys, the old and the new, the past and the future. She thought about Rose's wisdom, about learning to trust, about the difference between being saved and being supported, about how sometimes the best dreams are the ones we build together. "Yes," she said, "partner." Later that evening, as they closed up together, something they still did at least once a week, Skylar looked around their created space. The cafe had emptied except for a young woman in the corner, bent over a notebook, similar to the one Skylar had carried for so long. "Should we clear her out?" Benjamin asked softly. "No." Skylar smiled, remembering her own dreams sketched out in quiet moments. Let her stay. Sometimes the best ideas need a safe place to grow. And as they dimmed the lights, leaving just enough for the aspiring dreamer to continue her work, Skylar realized that some endings are really beginnings in disguise. She and Benjamin had started as opposites, the billionaire and the barista, control versus independence, but they had become something else entirely, proof that the strongest partnerships grow not from power or money, but from learning to dance together, even when the steps are new. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with evening energy. Inside the Brooklyn Bean, dreams were still brewing, some in coffee cups, some in notebooks, and some in the simple act of 2 people learning that love, like the perfect cup of coffee, requires both skill and heart to get just right. And thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.